all to the Berman Institute seminar, which is a little different this time than it usually is. I'm Jeff Kahn. I'm one of the faculty leadership in the Institute, and it's my pleasure to welcome you. I'm going to do a formal introduction of the playwrights after the actual performance, because they will lead the discussion, but let me just give you a little bit of introduction before we launch into the performance per se. So you know that we are here to perform Bioethics in Play, the drama of DNA. There is a book by the same title, The Drama of DNA, authored by Karen Rothenberg and Lynn, who are the playwrights of the piece you will hear performed shortly. Very briefly, Karen Rothenberg is currently a visiting professor here at the Berman Institute, but she also has a long history working in genetics and the law. She was the dean of the University of Maryland Law School from 1999 to 2009, and more recently served as senior advisor to the director of the National Human Genome Research Institute at NIH. Give her a little more formal introduction after the presentation. Lynn Bush, her co-author, is a associate adjunct research scientist in pediatrics at Columbia University. She has an interdisciplinary background in clinical and developmental psychology, bioethics, neuroscience, and genetics. And so the two of them have been working together on what they call narrative genomics for a number of years now, in ways that have been, I think, very provocative and very successful. So that you'll hear more from them at the conclusion of the performance, but let me now introduce what we're here to perform. The Drama of DNA is the title of a stage reading, really, performed by the thespians of the Berman Institute of Bioethics sitting before you.
And Howard.
Along with our colleague Howard Levy from internal medicine.
You're saying I'm not a thespian?
I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying you're not part of the Berman Institute of thespians.
Oh, he's a thespian, all right.
And you'll see why momentarily, I'm playing the narrator. I have no acting ability at all. All right. As the play commences, we find Bobby, Amy, Sam, and Ellen Friedman in the pediatric genetic clinic with their longtime clinical geneticist, Dr. Claire Hardy. Raise your hand, Neil. James Smith, their genetic counselor, is in his office with another family. Bobby is a 19-year-old with an autosomal recessive metabolic genetic disorder. His degenerative symptoms manifested several years ago and are of a similar nature to those beginning to affect his sister, Amy, age 16. Sam, their 9-year-old sibling, raise your hand, Sam, does not have manifestations of the heritable condition. They reside with Ellen, their mom, who is an elementary school teacher. Their dad, Howie, lives in another town with a second wife and young son.
I don't think I have to tell you what you folks are all too aware of. Both Bobby and Amy are clearly experiencing a decline in their health. Bobby more than Amy, perhaps, since his symptoms started first.
But isn't there anything new that could be done? I'm always seeing stories in the newspapers about all sorts of tests and treatments being developed for genetic diseases.
You'll find some way to cure us, won't you? Why did I have to come? I'm not sick.
So the reason I gathered you all here today is that there's a new opportunity to better understand the cause of Amy and Bobby's condition. You can be part of a new study that utilizes genomic technology. That includes you too, Sam.
How can I help them if I don't even have their bad genes?
We'll do anything you say, Dr. Hardy, as long as it's safe.
There's little danger. Just requires a simple blood draw. It's for a relatively new type of analysis called genome sequencing. We use this to help understand the causes of genetic disorders by looking at all the human genes we know about. I have consent forms for you all to sign. Take them home and read them before signing. And please contact either James Smith or me if you have any questions.
Oh, I know I want this test. I'll sign up. I don't need to read anything.
Great, another test that probably won't actually help us. And don't be so trusting, Amy.
Don't be so cynical, Bobby.
Let me explain further. Doctors at several institutions are collaborating to further understand genetic disease and are especially interested in studying disorders with an adolescent onset that are known to have increased prevalence in the Ashkenazi population. Hopefully, we'll all be able to learn more about Bobby and Amy's specific heritable defect and potentially help by learning what enzyme is involved.
Are you saying that this test is not just about my family, but mostly about lots of Jewish teenagers with Jewish diseases?
But I don't have any disease.
We'll be looking at several groups, including healthy siblings. I have 5 consent forms here for all the members of your immediate family. It's highly preferable for the kid's dad to participate and have his specimen taken too.
Dr. Hardy, I think it may be difficult to include Howie.
Dad hates doctor stuff and anything to do with sick people. That's why he left us.
I bet he'll do it when he hears it might help us.
Act 1, Scene 2. Bobby, Amy, Sam, and Mom have returned home from Dr. Hardy's office with an array of medical documents and consent forms.
After all these years with so few answers, finally, there's some really powerful genetic technology.
Let's just start reading the consent forms already, okay?
I wouldn't be so rushed if I were you. We're too optimistic. I've been going through all sorts of genetic tests longer than you, Amy. Why do you think it's going to be so different to solve our problem this time?
Because Dr. Hardy's consent form says so right here. We will use new techniques to read all of the genetic information in your cells that might cause a health problem if it contained a mistake. His new test will find our genetic mistakes.
You mean your genetic mistakes? Can I go to my friend's house now?
I wonder if they're doing all our DNA or just the part called whole exome? I read on the internet that exomes code for protein, and some doctor back east just used the whole exome test that helped save a baby.
I bet they look at our exomes first. It's got to be cheaper. Then maybe they'll look at all our genes. All I know is it says DNA tests can take years.
But we need our results sooner than that.
Just glancing at this, why do you think there's so many warnings in the consent form?
Mom, did you hear me? Can I walk over and play at Danny's?
Yeah, go play. I'll take care of your consent for you.
No wonder why they need 7 pages to explain things. They think we should be happy the whole world doesn't see our medical information. Listen, researchers who have access to genetic information will take measures to maintain the confidentiality of your genetic information. But how much of a measure? A ton or a drop in the bucket?
There's going to be lots of people reading about us when they bluntly say, even investigators at other participating institutions might see your information if they consult with other researchers.
So other than the janitor, everyone will know about this. Wow, look at this paragraph. Breaches in confidentiality involving genetic information could impact future insurability, employability, or reproduction plans, or have a negative impact on family relationships.
Wait, what does that mean? Reproduction plans. Does this mean it hurts my chances of having a baby?
Now,
Like,
that is
when
not
I'm
something we
old?
need to be worried about now. But this part about hurting family relationships? What happens if my sisters discover that our family's genetic information is known to so many people? They're going to hate me for that.
Why do you care what they think? Remember, it's been years since you've spoken to either one of your sisters. But do I have to worry about every single one of my boyfriends? They're gonna know that I have bad genes?
What about me? Is it going to hurt me from getting a job? That is, if I ever get better enough to work? Look at this. There may be a risk that genetic information obtained as a result of participation in research could be misused for discriminatory purposes, Mom.
Don't worry, Bobby. See, it says, however, state and federal laws provide some protections against genetic discrimination.
Here it even warns us, the Federal Privacy Act allows release of some information from your medical record without your permission. And they include law enforcement. That's the cops, Amy.
Well, if you don't get in trouble with the police again, there's no problem.
I'm not worried about the police. I'm worried about what you and Amy have. We don't want to sound ungrateful and risk losing our chance to get these tests. Remember, our insurance wouldn't even approve simpler genetic tests when James Smith tried them a few months ago. I don't earn enough to pay for them, and I wouldn't even know where else to go.
But here they say they store our samples indefinitely. That means everything about us goes into a federal data bank. But why? And forever?
No need to worry, Bobby. Didn't you read about everything being coded and locked up? The consent says all our information is password protected.
You have got to be kidding me. People hack into computer files all the time and crack codes.
They make sure to tell us how careful they are. Look, when results are reported in medical journals or at scientific meetings, study participants are not named and identified.
Yeah,
Chill.
but if you read on, it says, however, it may include your family history and other medical information. It is possible but unlikely that you and/or a family member could be recognized. Grandma would be so upset if our family story was out there for other people to know.
I wouldn't want the world to see that either. And what about Sam?
You know, I have another worry. This says we might get told about having certain diseases they might discover other than what Bobby and Amy have, even if we indicate that we don't want to know. Look at this. You will be given a choice to learn or not to learn the results of your genome sequencing. The only exception to opting out is if we find a result that has urgent importance to your health. We plan to share this type of a result with you.
Hi, I'm back. Nanny had to do homework. Jeez.
Doctors don't say anywhere in all these pages just how urgent or bad it has to be before they'll tell us the bad news. Does urgent importance mean you're going to die in a week?
The form says, in the future, we may contact you to find out if you're interested in learning about your results of gene variants that are important to your health or the health of your relatives.
They say important, but how will they decide what's really important enough to tell us?
Mom, so what are you going to do? What are you going to check off? I would like to be contacted about the diagnosis, possible treatment, or genetic causes of my child's disorder, or please do not contact me regarding the progress of the study or any specific gene change you find.
I don't understand why there isn't a checklist for us to say exactly which specific diseases, other than Amy's and Bobby's, that we want to be told, or which we really don't want to be told about.
But what if Amy wants to know everything like she always does, and you don't, which you always do, and it turns out both you guys have something like the BRCA gene that you hear so much about? And what about Sam?
Hey, don't worry about me. I am the healthy kid in the family.
And of course I would want to know everything. We'd all want to know, right?
Don't jump to conclusions, Amy. You can't speak for the whole family.
That's for sure.
You know, your dad and I are healthy. We obviously gave you something bad in our genes. But there's no need for us to know anything else, anything other than what you and Bobby have. And who knows if your dad is even going to show up to do his part of the test.
How could you not want to know what's in your genes? It's so old-fashioned. I mean, I checked off that I want to know all the results.
So did I, because I wouldn't want the doctors to know all about me and my genes if I didn't know too.
Maybe some people want to know everything, but I would not want any of us to know if something bad is going to happen like way into the future, like Alzheimer's or breast cancer. Why would we want to know ahead of time and then just worry? We're doing this to learn more about Bobby and Amy's disease.
So I don't really need to hear any of this stuff. I'm going to go do my homework.
The consent form also said something about your relatives learning your results, right?
Relatives?
Sisters.
My relatives? I certainly wouldn't want my mother hearing about any results. And I wouldn't even know how to begin to tell my sister Rachel. As for my sister Sarah, it is none of her business. If the doctors find something, I think I'm just going to keep it a secret.
A secret? You're terrible at keeping secrets, Mom.
And that nice genetic counselor can always tell Aunt Rachel and Aunt Sarah.
They don't need to know anything. If my sisters are curious, they can get tested themselves.
Mom, just sign the paper already and keep it simple.
It's not that simple.
After carefully studying the 7 pages as Dr. Hardy suggested, Mom phoned their genetic counselor, James Smith, to arrange for an appointment to discuss their list of questions just before the blood samples would be taken.
I'm really glad you folks came in so I can try to answer any questions you guys might have. Jeremy, Bobby, I know you find ethics really boring and confusing, but maybe there was something in here that you thought might be interesting.
Well, why do you have all this legal talk in there? And why do the cops and the feds have to know all about me?
Oh, Bobby, I'm sorry. Sometimes our lawyers and the IRB get a little carried away and they just want to warn people about everything. You're right. There are some privacy concerns, but it's not as bad as it sounds there. In fact, did you see that thing in there about earthquakes and other acts of God? Some of this really isn't so important.
That's the only thing not in there.
James Smith then elaborates on issues of privacy, confidentiality, and GINA, the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act.
I already signed my consent form, of course, but I do have one question. What does it mean, that part in there where it says that the blood test might cause troubles with my reproductive health? Like, you know, do I have to tell every single one of my boyfriends everything that you might find out about me? I mean, won't anyone want to marry me?
Don't worry, Amy. I'm sure there are plenty of people who want to marry you.
Well,
Again.
She's 16.
Now,
I'm very mature for my age.
these again are just general statements to caution about some of the things that might happen. And no, Amy, you don't have to tell everybody. But you should consider disclosing certain significant results when you're getting serious with somebody. Honesty is always important in any relationship.
You saying significant results is actually exactly where I'm going with my questions. How do you determine what disease, other than what Bobby and Amy have, is significant enough to tell me, even if I don't want to know? And what do you do if I don't want Amy to learn that she has something like breast cancer and she wants to know? Do we have to agree on her consent form as a minor? And will you respect that I do not want to know certain things like that? I just want to know what Amy and Bobby have.
Excellent questions. Let me try to explain it to you.
James Smith continues until their concerns have been addressed, all their concerns. Imagine the clock hand spinning. With all consent and assent documents signed, the Friedmans proceed to have blood specimens collected. Act 3. It's so complicated. Genomic research and disclosure of incidental findings. Several months pass, and now we find Dr. Hardy in a pediatric genetics consultation office speaking on the phone with James Smith moments before the Friedman family arrives to see the geneticists.
Dear Mom, I'm becoming a real thespian. Send. Oh, nuts, no, thespian. Oh, hello? Dr. Hardy, yes. Yes, I do. I agree with what the IRB said that we should say to them. This is not going to be an easy day for any of us.
Oh, James, why don't you come down from your office and take the room next to mine so I can send them straight to your office for further counseling? I am really, really worried about this. It's making me crazy. I've been agonizing over it all day. It's so complex. I need your help. I need your moral support.
Whew. Looks like we picked the wrong week to stop sniffing glue. It's going to be a long, difficult morning. I'll get some coffee first and come on down. You might want to make sure you've got someone to cover for you if you're not back in the clinic by noon.
Yeah, you too. Gotta go now.
Bye. Yeah, Mom? Yeah, I can explain it.
Oh, hi, Dr. Hardy. We're so anxious to hear what you have to say that might help Bobby and Amy.
Well, Amy, as for Bobby and your disorder, unfortunately, nothing conclusive was uncovered. It's often the case, too bad. So we need to wait until we gain further knowledge about how some of these genes relate to metabolic functioning. Right now, there's more we don't know than we do, but the field is rapidly evolving.
I told you this high-tech test would be a waste of time. Now how much longer?
Couldn't you have just told Mom that over the phone rather than make me miss swim practice at school?
Well, not exactly, Sam. While we didn't get the answers we were hoping to regarding Bobby and Amy's disease, we learned several things that I must discuss with some of you. Some potentially significant findings unrelated to what we were looking for.
How can you find something if you weren't looking for it?
Good question, Amy. Remember the consent document explained that we were sequencing all of the protein coding genes that can cause disease? Next generation sequencing uncovers a lot of information, not like the earlier genetic tests you've had that had targeted just very specific genes. Because your mom and Bobby are adults, I'll give them their results privately.
See, Amy? I'm an adult, and you're not.
Wait, what do you mean learn my results? I'm not sick. Am I? I don't have breast cancer, do I?
Nothing can happen to Mom. We all need her. I can't take care of Bobby and Amy.
First off, everyone needs to stay calm. I understand your fears. However, please try to calm down a bit while I talk to your mom.
Calm? That's maybe easy for you to say, but now you're telling us that we should be worried about Mom, not just me and Bobby.
Well, why don't we proceed so there'll be plenty of time for each of you folks to meet with James, should you wish. Let me have a moment to speak with your mom first.
So Dr. Hardy, please remember that I don't want to know if I'm getting breast cancer or if other bad things are going to happen when I get old or when my kids get old.
It's not my practice to report all deleterious findings from a research protocol investing another disorder.
Phew, I was so nervous about coming here today to find out how you can help Bobby and Amy that I couldn't remember where I parked my car yesterday. I spent so much time looking for it, and then I was so frazzled that I forgot to pick up Sam from her swim practice.
I know you mentioned last visit that you thought the stress of dealing with Bobby's and Amy's illness was making you forgetful about a lot of things at work and at home.
That's for sure. Do you think I need an antidepressant like the ones they advertise on TV?
I'd like to recommend that you see a neurologist and have some neuroimaging done and have a bit of the genome test redone by a CLIA lab.
Wait, what does my nervousness have to do with my gene test? Everyone knows it's because of Bobby and Amy's condition. And who is Dr. Clea, and why does Dr. Clea have to redo my test?
Oh, sorry for the confusion. This is complicated, and James can explain more. Oh, James, where are you?
I'm off.
There were certain findings from your particular genomic analysis that just hints at the possibility, and only a possibility, of a susceptibility to something. And we want to check it out more clearly. CLIA is not a doctor, rather a specially certified lab that helps determine if our research results were accurate.
Wait a second. You don't trust your own lab to know if your research is bogus? What does that have to do with my forgetting to pick up Sam from swim practice? You're not implying that I'm going to go senile when I'm an 80-year-old. I told you I don't want to know that stuff.
There are several possibilities that the neurologist will explore, and retesting at a CLIA lab may shed light as well.
Well, Alzheimer's is for old people. I'll worry about that when I get old. Now I need to think about my kids. Having some pills to relax me about that isn't just such a bad idea, Dr. Hardy. So thanks for suggesting it.
Assuming the CLIA lab result supports the research finding, at least it will be the neurologist having to tell her she likely has early onset Alzheimer's disease on top of the stress. Now I have to brace myself for more. Bobby, can I speak with you next?
Oh my goodness, what are you going to tell us?
Please let me speak to Bobby alone for a moment. Bobby, it's your choice as an adult if you want your mom here or not.
This sounds serious. Tell me first. I thought you said Amy and me had inconclusive genes.
Sorry for any confusion, Bobby. I was referring to the disease we were investigating. We found some extra concerns and had the results repeated by a different lab, a CLIA lab, to confirm their validity.
Just give it to me straight, Doc.
Well, the genome analysis shows that you carry the BRCA mutation. That doesn't necessarily mean you'll get breast cancer. It only indicates the susceptibility, the possibility for getting a disease. Indeed, your risk is quite low, only about 6% lifetime risk for breast cancer. But since it's much higher than the average male, we felt you should share it with you so you can be monitored now that we know what to look for.
I think you totally confused my results with Amy's or my mom. That's a girl's disease.
Well, while breast cancer caused by a gene mutation occurs far more often in women, men can carry these mutations as frequently, but they're far less likely to develop breast cancer.
So Amy and Sam have breast cancer too, and Mom?
First off, let me be clear that I'm not saying you have breast cancer, only that you carry the genetic mutation associated with the possibility of getting breast cancer. We call that higher risk, not definitely getting the disease.
This is so embarrassing. Do I have to tell my friends?
This is private information that you don't have to share with your friends unless you want to. James is next door and can explain in more detail, including our recommendation for regular surveillance now that we have this information. Why don't you and he talk while I speak with your mom about something else?
Mom, I have breast cancer.
Please remember, you don't have breast cancer now and might never even get it. It's only a potential future possibility, a slight future possibility. And now you know to be proactive and get early monitoring.
Oh my goodness, is this some kind of nightmare? We came here for you to tell us results that can help my kid's disease. And now you're telling Bobby that he's going to die from breast cancer instead?
I did not say that Bobby had breast cancer or would die from it. Just that the sequencing showed a small increased risk. James can explain further after we're done here. But first I need to discuss something else with you about Sam.
Oh my gosh, please don't tell me you've discovered that she has bad genes. She's my healthy one.
Well, since our findings about Amy and Bobby's genetic defect was inconclusive, and Sam is currently without symptoms, unfortunately, I'm unable to say with any certainty whether Sam will ever be similarly affected or not. However,
Oh no. You're going to tell me that she has the breast cancer gene too?
no, I'm not referring to a BRCA mutation. And given Sam's age, most geneticists would not report research results that may possibly have health implications much later in life, unless we can provide treatment or screening prior to adulthood, when they can decide for themselves if they want to know that information. Though currently there's a lot of debate about this.
Okay, so she's okay then?
We are concerned about something else that we found in the genomic testing related to her heart.
You must be mistaken. Sam does not have a heart murmur. And she's a really good athlete. She runs and she swims like a fish. She has since she was little. She's been on our Y swim team and she happens to be on the high school team one day.
There's a condition called long QT syndrome that's associated with rhythm disturbances in the heart and potentially can be very serious and lead to passing out or sudden death. I advise kids to avoid competitive sports. Unfortunately, competitive swimming can be particularly dangerous because passing out in the water can result in drowning. At this point in time, we can't perfectly predict when or which patients with the genetic predisposition to long QT syndrome will have an arrhythmia associated with sudden cardiac arrest. So I need to share the seriousness of this with Sam and tell her we very strongly recommend that competitive athletics be forsaken.
Oh, no. You can't tell her anything is wrong. Remember, you just said doctors don't tell kids Sam's age? And anyway, remember you told me these tests aren't certain.
You are correct that for kids, most geneticists traditionally do not report disease susceptibility that may affect them later in life, particularly when there are no effective interventions in childhood. This, however, has immediate implications and interventions, which is why we return these results. There is the potential for sudden death without treatment and an excellent outcome with treatment, including taking a medication to protect the heart. And we've already confirmed this result in a CLIA lab. They validated our findings. Because of the severe ramifications for some kids, and we don't know who, I must inform her so she'll give up competitive sports, especially competitive swimming.
No, that would devastate her. Let's wait until high school, and then I can just say I have to go to work earlier so I can't take her to the 6 a.m. swim practices.
She should be closely followed by a cardiologist who may also consider an implantable defibrillator. We really need to bring Sam into this discussion now.
So why does my mom look so sad?
Sam, your mom's concerned because we found something in your test called long QT syndrome. that's been linked to very serious heart problems in some young people, though not everyone. Problem is, we aren't fully sure who will be the kid whose heart suddenly stops. Now that the sequencing study discovered this, we're able to provide interventions that we would never have had a clue you may have needed to potentially prevent serious ill harm. Because long QT can be most dangerous when doing competitive sports, I must advise you to immediately stop competitive swimming. There are so many wonderful activities you can do, art, music.
You're telling me I can't do the one thing I do best?
I can't believe this is happening. Sam was my healthy kid just this morning.
I am so sorry that Sam has long QT syndrome. We would never have looked for this result or burdened you with it if it wasn't to identify a life-threatening risk that can be minimized. It's so complicated. James is next door to help you folks deal with all this. He'll probably do counseling and explain further what steps are needed next. Come on, James.
Take a bow. So that's the end of the play, and before I welcome Karen and Lynn up here to moderate the discussion, I should just say one more thing. So the play you heard is an adaptation of other vignettes that they have authored together and is part of chapter 3 of this book, The Drama of DNA, published by Oxford University Press in 2014, available at your better bookstores. So without further ado, let's welcome the authors of the play. You heard me already introduce Karen Rothenberg and Lynn Bush. I don't think I should do any more, just so we have more time for discussion. Okay, well, thank you both for that.
Thank you. I should say, we get no royalties for that book, so that's just, thank you for mentioning it, I might add. Okay, so first of all, on behalf of Lynn, we wanted to thank you all for just a fantastic job, and anything that was irreverent, they added. That was not in the script, and they all have a really good sense of humor, and I'm sure Deborah's, clicking around there on her. It's just very typical of a 16-year-old, yeah. So anyway, what we would like to do first, before we open it up to the audience, is to just first, since we've got this panel of experts that think about bioethics and genetics every day, day in and day out, what their reaction was to the part they were playing and how they felt as they were speaking those words. Particularly Sam at the end, I'm sure. No, I'll come to you last. Howard, let's start. Howard practices as a geneticist, so he's dealing with DNA sequencing issues all the time.
Yeah, I don't envy my genetic counseling friends. Thank you all. It's hard. And I guess the one thing that I try to emphasize in my ad living there is that, as I think everyone in the room knows, there's a tough balance in consent forms and informed consent about putting in enough to truly inform people and putting in too much that creates a lot of unneeded concern and distracts from the real issues. So I hope we'll all continue to spend a lot of time thinking about that.
I will say, when we did a version of this before the Society of Genetic Counselors, the National Society of Genetic Counselors, it was a big group. Their laughing was, they couldn't stop laughing about, Dr. Hardy just pushing it all back onto the genetic counselor, and I think that is part of a reality that we're seeing here. Oh, the genetic counsel will handle that. Genetic counsel will handle that, and that dynamic, in fact, goes on. I'm sure not at Hopkins, but.
I should just add one thing. All of the informed consent dialogue is actually real informed consent, a composite that we took from the internet. So as bizarre as some of the wording sounds, it's in major academic and commercial settings.
Except for the stuff not in the Hopkins informed consent. Yeah.
So I joked when I first came in here today that, Dr. Hardy has arrived, the one with terrible communication skills, as I read the script last night. I am just sort of struck by one of the things that I'm always interested in and concerned about, which is fear among physicians in particular, and what fear and their own personal discomfort, internal discomfort, makes them do or say or not do or say or be a certain way or not. And I think Dr. Hardy's role really conveys that pretty well.
If I just one of the things we were trying to do is when Dr. Hardy says, oh, well, the neurologist will handle that, is that as we're doing this genome sequencing, and it involves so many possible specialties and specialists having to try to explain to the patient or the research subject what this means, that's a dynamic that we haven't had when we were just dealing with a test for a particular disorder.
And particularly when most of those specialists really don't have a solid understanding of genomics.
Can I just say,
Yeah.
one other thing is also the sort of the encouragement, implicit encouragement that the doctor gave to the family to participate in the study in the first place, in the hopes that something about the family would be discovered that would be helpful, which is a really sort of blown up hope in the first place. But the sort of focusing only on the benefit and really not at all focusing on the potential harm or burden that the family might experience from getting information that they really didn't want to know. So on the one hand, the family's really encouraged to participate, and then all this information sort of is a total shock to them because there's really no preparation for that.
And I just, maybe as a footnote on that, there's a lot of debate going on now on the ethical and societal issues with genomic sequencing about the graying of the role of the researcher and the role of the clinician when you're giving research results back, and that sense of the therapeutic misconception that often happens as well that Gail was struggling with.
So, contrary to what you said, I actually don't do genetics every day. So I'm one of the outliers here that's not part of.
You get to do research on it.
No, I'm not saying there's nothing here that's relevant to what I do, but I don't do genetics, and I guess one thing that I was wondering and hoping was not realistic was this sense that results like the ones in the play, somebody would feel a responsibility to give back. I mean, I guess I could just say that on some gut level that felt sort of ridiculous. So,
Lynn might want to say something.
okay, I don't know if you actually want people in the audience to be able to talk or not.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll come back to that. Hold that thought, though.
So, two observations, and I think one is we're told at the beginning that we have an autosomal recessive disease, and symptoms have started to appear, and neither of us played those symptoms other than our usual neuroses. It really was unclear, and I was trying to think as we were getting ready to read this, what it might mean to actually not just read this play, but to act this play, and what it would really mean to be suffering from some unspecified recessive disorder that is getting worse, in which we not only had the tension in the family members, which we demonstrated, I think, pretty well, but there was this overlay of experience and a trajectory towards getting worse, and the accumulation of fear and desperation that would accompany that, which I think would result in a very, very different reading, probably not, best for a lunch kind of talk, but would be more realistic. And the second observation that I think was good was that although there was some pressure to sign the documents, there were some sort of best practices, if you will. The documents were given to people, they could, they took it home, they read it together, and that was done and sort of encouraged, and also sends a different sort of message than would be normally the state of affairs. So I think there's that positive side of it.
So one thing that I did find unrealistic, I have to say, is the 7-page consent form. That seems grossly underestimated. It is the case. I have a colleague who, long QT is something you return. It's serious, it's immediate. The coincidence of all of these terrible things happening in one family at one time.
Is 6% breast cancer?
For BRCA.
For being
Would that be,
So,
the family feels like they must, the doctor feels like they must return that?
It's a great question for someone on the cusp of adulthood, right? So
Yeah.
one
That's
could
why I
easily
got-
argue that at age 19, that's maybe younger than it needs to be disclosed. But by the time he's in his 30s or maybe 20s, he would need to know that.
Or married and thinking about
Or-
having children.
But, you know, compounded by what my disease is, and that, again, that disease trajectory, but I'm even gonna be alive to know, or to need to know that information, right? So it's a susceptibility gene. And if I'm not gonna live long enough to experience it, what's that added bit of information doing?
And then just to piggyback on one thing that Jeremy said, the dynamics that exist in a family, that we all have ridiculous families, and there are dynamics, and it's just ramped up anytime there's stress. And when you're in a situation where you have two very seriously ill children, then you get all this, like, it's just gonna ramp everything up.
Yeah, and in addition to being a 9-year-old today, I'm also a pediatrician. So it was sort of interesting to think about how, as a pediatrician, I would have managed this information back to the family, specifically back to this child. And I think, as Deborah said, long QT, because it is something that is dangerous, but you would also return it sort of in conjunction with working with a cardiologist and having a whole plan set up. So I think this is sort of some of the, we teach ethics, you know, about breaking bad news, sort of this was done in the worst possible way, because there wasn't a plan, like there was no strategy. There was no plan involved about what to do about it in a way that could allow this child, who is already sort of the healthy child in a sick family, to manage this new bit of information about this very confusing illness. So I think it was interesting to hear all the things that can go wrong when well-intentioned people are trying to provide information.
And when the second sentence from the doc to the 9-year-old is sudden death.
Just very quickly before taking to the audience, just as a clarification, it was actually a pediatric clinical geneticist who helped write some of those lines, because I wanted to really get down, and I'm not suggesting that it's the way that it should be done ethically or best practice. And the same thing for someone, an adult geneticist dealing in oncology, wrote the lines for the BRCA, for giving it to Bobby. So the reality is there's just all different ways of doing it, and that's why we want to open up the discussion, because just because it's being done that way, is that how it ought to be done, or we want it to be done?
Well, it's the teachable moment about how not to do it. Okay, Jeff, should we just go?
Yeah, please.
Questions, comments? Yes.
A question for Howard and Maggie, and I mean for all of you, but clinicians, specifically.
You can still hear
Did you-
everyone. Can you hear in the back?
It'd just be better
Oh,
for
they can't hear in the
the recording too, so let's talk to microphones, thanks.
So my question for the clinicians and for anyone is, did you have, if I know that it might not be so likely that for one family that they would get all these results, but if this were a true scenario, did you have sort of a gut feeling as a clinician about whether this was a good outcome for the family, whether this was, you know, especially the long QT findings. So if this family kind of, would you have felt that something good was done by discovering that, or that the family, that this was sort of a you know, in general?
Is their life better now?
Yeah.
So for me, it helps to separate the immediate outcome from the longer term outcome. Long term, I think it's clear that people are better off knowing that there's an illness that can result in death or severe harm, and that something can be done about it. So the cop-out easy answer is absolutely something good was done, thinking in the long term. Short term, this was a good example of how not to deliver that information. And it is challenging. It's very hard to deliver it well. We MDs are notoriously terrible at it. That's a big part of why the genetic counseling field exists, because it was easier to create another entire field than to train MDs to be more compassionate. Thank goodness we have genetic counselors to do that. But yes, more education would be helpful to coach people on delivering it in a more supportive, gentler way.
Yes. Jeremy, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Thank you for excellent performance. It was very enlightening. I had a couple of questions or comments. I think that when nothing more is being done other than genetic testing, it is reasonable for that there could be a 7-page consent form. Now, whether it includes everything that should be included, I mean, that's another story, but I don't think that's unrealistic. I think a concern, of course, is that with fancy genetic sequencing that can be done today, you can't assure anybody of their privacy completely. And I mean, there has to be a discussion of where that leads us with genetic research going forward, because, I mean, anybody can be identified potentially from the genetic testing that's being done today, even with extensive safeguards. And the question that I would have for the group, and it probably will take more than a few minutes, what recommendations would you have in reconstructing the current consent form documents that we have? I mean, what should we be doing to make the process fairer for the individuals being tested, and also for allowing genetic research to take place?
So the tension, and presumably we all understand it, is that the kinds of tests that were conducted that led to the clinicians being compelled to return the results were not tests that are routinely done. So it's not like, so it seems that at least providing some examples, which I think the mom was really trying to get at, is sort of what counts as significant? What are you feeling like you have to tell me, and what are the things that you feel like you don't have to tell me? Giving more examples about both what those are, but what the reasoning is behind it. So with, I don't know, I'm the ignorant one here on the panel, but to not only, to sort of say, we're going to give you an increased breast cancer risk if it is even 2% higher, which makes your absolute risk from whatever, I'm going to make it up, 8% to 12%. It's like, okay. And even if you assume people understood the risk information, that if you did understand the risk information, you would say, wow, good for me to know their threshold. And to some degree, I think that really helps a family decide whether or not they want the test. Because again, sort of where I started, these are not tests that are routinely done. Athletes are not routinely screened for this, as far as I know.
Well, there's some encouragement to do EKG screening for athletes, but it's not been accepted.
The genetic test for the 9-year-olds is maybe not routinely done in at least the sports programs my children participate in. So
ultrasound testing is...
There's some...
Anyway, so it just seems like giving a little more information about what you would have to be told is a way that helps you to make a decision about whether you want to participate. And it could be a downside if you actually want the information about your kid's genetic condition, but that may be the trade-off you have to make.
This was in a different context, though. The context of this was as a sibling for a research study.
I don't understand that, but the family then has to decide if they don't want that information, they have to forego being part of this study about their kid's metabolic disorder, which they may have a real interest in.
Right, and which is part of the difficulty that families are put in, because they really, weighing the benefits is they typically will do anything possible
Right.
to find out an answer, particularly if they don't really construe the idea that this is research and not necessarily to benefit them. That's where it gets particularly muddy.
But Beryl, if I understood your question, though, you were asking about privacy.
Right.
And you were asking about even
How
if
can you ensure privacy?
even if you
Today's
decide you
context is
want
just-
to be tested, even if you have the information about threshold and you decide you want to be tested, how do you make clear to people that their identity is not
Yeah.
fully
You
protected?
can't guarantee that.
Yeah, can I say something about that? So in the past, it's certainly, my experience has been that when folks are reading the consent forms for genetic studies, and background, I'm a geneticist by training, the part about privacy, you might be re-identified, the chance is really low, that's frequently been minimized in the past. I think we have to stop doing that. But I think we also have to emphasize that, I can't tell you anything about your genetics unless lots of people are willing to share their DNA with me and their medical information, right? I can't tell any individual the meaning of what I find in their DNA without having seen many, 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 many people's DNA and medical information. And I think putting that together, I mean, yes, there's this risk. We don't actually know. There are some people who are trying to quantify the actual risk of being re-identified, but even if you are re-identified, it's unclear what risks and harms might come to you upon re-identification. And I think those are really important things to talk about, and we haven't had robust conversations about that, but it is something we can quantify and have a conversation about.
Could
I
I
just-
just have, oh,
I have an urge at this juncture. Anyone who's ever heard me speak at anything related to this knows that I viscerally abhor genetic exceptionalism. So I'm going to take this moment to make that same comment. I don't think there's anything special about genomics in this question about privacy, and especially as we move into the electronic health record era, and as we move into population and global health, and developing databases and registries and sharing information, that risk of privacy not being maintained is inherent in everything. And I think most of us, if we don't yet realize it, will eventually come to realize that if we want to move medicine forward, both individual or precision medicine and population medicine, we as society are going to have to accept some reduced level of privacy. So you're right on one level, we need to be more upfront about what can be kept private and what can't be. But I think we also need to be upfront about what are the real risks of sacrificing that privacy. And as you pointed out, they're probably not as bad as they've been made to sound.
so I would just add 2 points. In a research protocol in which you give people individual results, there is not the same protection of privacy, just as a general rule, than when you don't give results, because it's then going to get in the records. So that, and increasingly in research protocols, research results are being given then. So that's one threat, subjectively privacy. And then just to add to Howard, it's the new precision medicine initiative that the president announced a few weeks ago. There is a major thrust of looking at how to, I hate to use the word balance, but how to deal with the privacy issues and the importance of sharing data. And we need to have a bigger public conversation about the values, the benefits and the risks of that. We have to change our discussion. Whether it's different from genomics or not, I'll just be provocative. Okay, the only difference is that it's not just your information. So I may want to be in that research protocol and my sister doesn't want that information, and that's partly what we were trying to get out of this. And so you can make decisions for yourself, but they can have ramifications. And that may not be unique to genetics or not. We could debate that all day. But open up another question. Another question? Yeah.
Wait for the mic.
Karen and Lynn, could you reflect for a minute on the potential use of drama as a means of conveying information as part of the informed consent process? That is to say, perhaps fancifully, let us imagine an even more professionally produced version of this. Stretch your imagination. And potential subjects in a whole exome or whole genome research project were encouraged to look at this, not as a substitute for the direct informed consent process, but as a setup to potentially enable them to ask questions more intelligently, rather than giving them the brochure or the document beforehand.
Do you want to go first? I have a okay.
Sure.
It depends what the goal is. I mean, I'm not sure after reading this if less people would agree to be in the research. I mean, so let's, getting a sense from the audience, I mean, they were raising a lot of questions about interpersonal conflict and relationships that's going to come out of different values about whether they want information or not. When I'm in the counseling situation, I always ask somebody, well, how good are you keeping a secret? How good are you at keeping a secret? Because I'm not sure how often, and this maybe is should be part of genetic counseling, the question is asked is, well, have you talked to your sisters and your siblings and your parents and your children about being, not them necessarily being part of the research, but that you're going to be in research? And George Church, you know, the one who has where they put everything on the internet and all, they're supposed to have a dialogue with the families. I don't know what that really means, but that's public for the world to read, and that has implications for the family. So I think it could be used in a positive way. It could be misused in a way. We've actually been approached in certain circumstances of showing parts of some of our vignettes just in that context.
So just along
It
these
hasn't been
lines,
evaluated yet.
similar approaches are actually used in many parts of the developing world too, as part of the consent process. And it's done not as a recruitment tool per se, but as a way to enhance understanding about the issues. So drama is used frequently in a lot of HIV prevention and treatment work throughout parts of sub-Saharan Africa in particular, with songs and dances that are developed by the communities to enable a better communication process. And so it can be explored in that way. To think about it, this showed one side, which, you know, just the laugh meter that you got from the genetic counselors was a corrective on one problem that might be fixed. To use this for informed consent, you might want to turn the problem upside down a bit and take the situation where the family is energized and engaged and comes and requests genetic testing as a way to find out what's wrong and to make sure that Sam is protected, so you can play out the options in different ways, so that you get highly motivated, so that you then get to a point where there's understanding.
Right, we had actually at American College of Medical Genetics a few years ago, we did a poster for this play. We weren't given time for an actual play, and we were trying to think, how do you put something like this on a poster? We made a spinning wheel, and we made it Context Matters. And exactly these kind of scenarios where in the spinning, we said, what if? What if the family wanted something? And what if, and we put a couple of those things into play, both at Baylor for a public engagement that they did using one of the plays, to start looking at, you know, enhancing dialogue and discourse between the geneticists who it can be very awkward at times with the public. So I think it's, you know, an avenue that you can really change the contextual variations to see what they say and have them weigh in.
We have to be done. But thank you, both Lynn and Karen, and another round of applause for them.